Hello, customers and partners, and welcome to Tanzu Summit 2021. My name's Joe Bagley. I'm the VP and CTO here at EMEA for VMware, and I'm going to be your host throughout this event. Now, we've got an amazing collection of speakers that you're going to hear from in the next 90 minutes, and we're going to be covering Dell Technologies' integration with Tanzu, the future of modern apps, as well as how to best use cloud-native applications both on and off premises with Dell Technologies and VMware Tanzu. And we're really going to show you that roadmap for the future for all of your applications, how you're going to take your existing applications and over a longer term period, modernize those and all the options that working with VMware and Dell Technologies brings. So on today's agenda, we've got some very exciting sessions. First up, we've got the future of modern apps with Dell Tech and VMware Tanzu, which is going to be with my friend and colleague, Elliot Young, who's the CTO for the UK at Dell Technologies. And then we're into a session with RJ Patel. RJ is the SVP and the GM of our Modern Applications Business Unit here at VMware. He's really driving what goes on with applications for VMware, and he's going to talk a little bit more about Tanzu and how we can accelerate innovation with that. Then it's on to Itzik Reich. Itzik's the VP of Engineering Technology at Dell Tech, and he's going to talk about the Dell Technologies Tanzu Advantage. And then we've gone to a demo, and that demo is with Kevin Brady, and he's a staff solution architect here at VMware, and he's going to do a demo of actually managing Kubernetes in the hybrid cloud, actually showing the products in action. And then always the best bit for me, sorry, Elliot, it is the best bit, is the interview with a customer. And we're off to see Rui from Timmy Tech. And they've got a fantastic story we're going to finish off with at the end there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in the chat as we go through. And I hope you enjoy the next 90 minutes as we put a lot of effort in to make it enjoyable for you. So, are you interested in learning how customers can use their existing virtualization environment to support the latest cloud-native constructs, including container orchestration and Kubernetes? So make sure to stay tuned in for the duration of this event, and here's why. Because modernizing applications is the key to transformation. Every customer I talk to tells me that actually their top priority at the moment is modernizing the applications in their environment. But what they have to realize is that that is a multi-year plan process and has to have all the options available. And so today you're going to learn how to have the chance to best use cloud native applications for both on and off premises options. It's not all about taking everything and putting it in one cloud. The future is highly distributed applications in multiple locations, taking advantages of all the latest technologies. And it's true, 78% of CIOs that we surveyed agree that improving their applications portfolio is the top priority. So what you need to learn as well is how you can actually use your leverage and build on your existing virtualization environment to support the latest cloud native constructs, and including container orchestration with Kubernetes you're going to hear about. The point here is that essentially what you're looking at is we're taking all that work that's been done so far in the industry, not throwing it all away and suddenly rewriting it all in public cloud, but evolving it, modernizing it, migrating it, managing it to make the best of what we can anywhere. And that's really behind the story that we're going to tell you today. As we go forward, by 2022, 90% of new apps are going to be delivered via cloud-native approaches. So make sure you're not missing that. But we're going to get a lot more into that. And so, as I said, I'm not going to be running a one-man show today. So let's bring my friend and colleague Elliot onto the stage. Please welcome Elliot Young. Elliot's the CTO for UK at Dell Technologies. Elliot, welcome.
Hello, Joe. How are you doing? It's an honor to stand side by side with you, one of Dell Technologies' most valued business partners. Customers love taking advantage of our products, which have been engineered together. And I think that's important given the future of modern apps, especially as IDC is saying that out of the expected 500 million apps which will be built in the next 5 years, the majority of the container instances will be deployed primarily in the data center by 2023.
I mean, that's really interesting because everyone talks about containers and cloud native being done in the cloud, yet all the data that we're seeing says it's not going to be done so completely. It's going to be done on off premises. So Elliot, why don't you start by giving us a little bit more insight into why that is and what's going on in that space?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think there are 3 points I'd make in this area. I'm constantly getting feedback that customers want space and security to just get it right, to just be able to have a safe space to try out multiple container-based scenarios and app configurations where there won't be a sudden penalty, for example, for transferring too much data, or for growing the number of containers too quickly, or for adjusting and testing your security posture. Understandably, they want to simplify it and get control and speed up the app development. And they also want to get a head start on best practice when it comes to DevOps or DevSecOps. And And then when they're ready to operate a multi-cloud Kubernetes platform, they're glad they started from day one with a platform to do just that, which of course is Tanzu. And what we're doing here at Dell Technologies is enabling different scenarios here. We're giving choice to our customers. Some of them are containerizing existing apps, and that's where they see the benefit. Others are focusing on building new modern apps from scratch, and they need a platform to do that. Others are beating their competition by taking advantage of new capabilities first, like, for example, hosting SQL Server in containers, or running SQL Server in a container with Tanzu, but in Azure, and that Azure is on-premise, and all of it's running in VxRail from Dell Technologies. So I'm just getting started here with the possibilities, but you can do amazing things with these combinations. Second point I'd make is that most developers don't want to spend their time engineering the platform that it runs on. They don't want to create a custom solution which runs auctions to see which cluster should be used to host a new container, or worrying about the coverage of availability zones, or setting up load balancing, or how do you gracefully scale down. And thankfully they don't have to, because the whole Dell hyper-converged solution is software defined and is integrated with Tanzu, which does all of that for you. And I think we'll see some examples of that later on. But they absolutely do want their application to take advantage of benefits and capabilities which are platform specific. I mean, you choose a multi-cloud for a reason. Each cloud has different capabilities and different price points. And for example, when a containerized application starts up, it doesn't need to understand the mechanics of how it gets to its blob store, for example. But if it's running on-premise, the platform can naturally give it access to like a pre-integrated, blistering fast, elastic storage solution. And that's already validated with Tanzu. Or here's another example. A lot of our customers build AI models to make predictions. So for example, predict if this is going to be a good loan, or predict what product to display on the final page before checkout, or maybe predict how likely this email is to be about a topic that we care about before it's delivered. So they need to be fast, need to be responsive. But you end up with these tiny, complex models in multiple containers, all running in parallel. Now, if the use case is one which is accelerated with GPUs or AI accelerators, for example, wouldn't it be good to have the platform give you access to that functionality when it runs in that environment? And maybe when it runs in one environment, it runs at normal speed. But in some use cases, you run it on VxRail with certified NVIDIA GPUs, and therefore it can really take advantage of that incredible acceleration. And that design pattern is common in an MLOps approach, for example, for models which may drift over time, and then in the background you have challenger models which are sitting there in containers waiting to go and take over processing if they need to do that. And that kind of approach brings me on to point 3. So what if you want all of that technology but you don't want to run it yourself? Maybe you want to have access to VxRail and the storage and the GPUs, etc. But you don't want to actually buy it up front. Maybe you just want to pay for it when you actually use it, or if you suddenly need to scale up. But you want it reserved for you either in your own data center or in the remote data center which you don't have to run. Now you can do that with Dell Technologies with our Apex service. And previously, for some organizations, moving existing workloads to a public cloud was a daunting thought, what with security considerations, changing host names, IP addresses, certificates. But those problems are gone with a combination of Apex and Tanzu. Now you pay only what you use on-premise or in Azure, or on-premise in Azure Arc, for example, because it's all managed through Tanzu to any Tanzu cloud connector. And here's the link to the ML comment I was making earlier. What if you don't want to run the Tanzu solution yourself? Dell Technologies offers a fully managed service which runs solutions built on top of Tanzu, such as managed ML. In that case, let us take care of the data management, the training the models, the AI libraries configuration, whilst giving you best-in-class Kubernetes on a validated design. Then we add in the option of our secret source of hardware acceleration with NVIDIA, and we protect it all with a security point of view, separately back it up with PowerProtect Data Manager. And best of all, you don't even need to purchase any kit up front, because you can just pay for what you consume with Apex, what you build with Tanzu. With Dell Technologies, you're getting the space and security that you need. It not only gives you lots of choices, but just consider the head start that you now have compared to your competition purely by running your Tanzu solution on the Dell technology stack.
So that's, I mean, it sounds awesome. It sounds like the wonderful panacea, right? You know, you can have your cake and eat it. You can, if you don't want to pay for it, you can pay for it as you go on premises as much as you can in the cloud. And, you know, that sounds great. How easy is it to actually sort of get involved with Apex or Tanzu? You know, if I wanted to start that tomorrow, where would I go?
Well, it's incredibly fast to get started. You know, in countries across EMEA, what we've done is we've seeded locations with equipment that's ready there, sat waiting to go. In particular, if you're working with partners like Equinix. If you go onto the Dell website and have a look for Apex, you can sign up to the live console. And that live console, it gives you one place where you can configure these kind of service offerings. And the key thing that we want to do, as I say, is give people choice. So you might say, well, actually, you know what, I'll start with these pre-configured options which come in building blocks, or for my particular use case, I want a specific solution. So you can craft this specific unique solution that you want for you with the entire Tanzu stack on it, with the validated design, all supported from one place, and then we will ship that to your location of choice, which could be your own data center, it could be a partner's data center. In that particular case, about 2 weeks later, an environment will pop up, which is pre-configured and ready for you to start getting the benefits of the whole Tanzu container solution.
Apps, and that's what we're discussing here. It's not just about putting things in data centers anymore. There's very much the edge involved too, and we're seeing a lot of conversations around what we're doing at the edge. Obviously, we've made great strides forward, obviously announcing our edge stack recently at VMware. I know edge has been at the heart of what's been going on at Dell for many years now. So what's the take in terms of modern apps and the edge from Dell's perspective?
Well, we want people to have the capability to choose where they deploy their workloads, where they run and operate them. We're seeing more and more use cases where, for reasons of latency and capabilities, connection to 5G infrastructure, that kind of thing, that there's more and more use cases to put those components at the edge. And so we've developed the VxRail solution with that in mind. And you can have components which needn't be in a data center at all. And if they are all controlled from a single control plane, then it leaves it up to Tanzu to decide where is the right place at the right time to run this particular app or this particular container. And it can take decisions based on, you know, the expectations you've set or predefined rules you've put into the system to say, you know what, at this particular point, I want to have this number of instances running in this particular case. Because it's all software defined, the platform can take the decision to move those applications to the right location of where they need to be. And that is constantly monitored. And every time there's a change or a new request for resources come in, or you add in a new edge seamlessly node, the system is going to reconfigure itself to take advantage of that and make sure it's meeting the expectations. And that could be for things like load balancing or outages at edge locations. We have some remote operations that take place on oil rigs, for example, you know, which sometimes have connectivity, sometimes don't.
Yep.
It's great for telcos. There's a huge number of different use cases we're seeing, where we're seeing this start where data sat in a public cloud. It came back on premise to a data center, and now it's going back out again to the edge locations.
So when we talk to customers, we talk about often the 5 R's of application modernization, you know, retire, rehost, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that, you know, you spend as much time talking to customers as I do about modernizing applications. What's the sort of major challenges that customers are seeing when you talk to them about approaching those 5 R's? I mean, I always joke that, you know, 5 years ago, people were saying, oh, we've chosen Cloud X, and we're all in on Cloud X, and within 2 years, we're going to have moved 50% of our applications to Cloud X. And of course, none of that happened for hardly anyone. So what's leading the conversations that you're having with customers as they go through these application modernization challenges?
Well, I think a key consideration is security. You know, large organizations have put a huge amount of effort into getting their on-premise, their data center approach right to security, and then someone comes along and says, you know what, I'm going to do all that that kind of functionality in a public cloud, and security people are having a heart attack about that, but they needn't, because you know, this is something where if you architect that into the process from the DevSecOps approach, then you can start to have confidence that any new applications that you're building are going to be able to be portable and run in any cloud. But that doesn't necessarily help them with the applications that need to be modernized, which have already been built. If you look at, for example, banks, they're facing certain challenges where over the years they've built up a hierarchy of multiple different layers, and you might have 5 or 6 different layers within the organization, and right at the center there's a mainframe. Okay, so how is an application running in a container in a cloud suddenly going to bust through 5 different layers to get through to the mainframe and pull the data it needs and drag it out again? So we're working with customers to look at different design patterns where, for example, you take a live cache and implement that in a cloud, which can be any cloud, and that way you've still got the functionality that you need from the back end, but you haven't been limited by the old ways of working, the old ways of approaching that. We've also been driven by factors such as data sovereignty. Where can the data exist? Which geographical regions? Are there limitations on where it can be copied to? And once you start thinking about that, you start thinking about, well, how do I protect that data? Now that the data is in multiple locations, is there a situation where I need to understand how to protect that data and then what to do with it to get it back? Because it's no longer a simple case of recovery into one location if you're recovering to multiple availability zones around the world. And then to make things even more complicated, as much as we're doing our best to build the best application with the customers, you've got bad actors who are coming along and doing their best to do the complete opposite and to attack all the great things that you've just created. And so for that, we're looking at integrating cybersecurity, which is just when you thought you've got to the stage of protecting yourself from disaster recovery, we're now into a situation where you have to think about what's the difference between disaster recovery and cybersecurity, and how do you implement that in the container world in a multi-cloud situation. And thankfully, picking a platform which has considered those kind of options right from the start, it gives you a massive head start. If you were just starting from scratch with Kubernetes and containers, you would have to be thinking about all of these kind of challenges yourself. But this is one of the great things that I love about engineering a solution between Dell and VMware together, is that we've done so many thousands of hours of testing and so many different configuration options, and we've invested so much in proving that these solutions work together, that you come up with a combined joined stack which is ready to use, and a lot of these things are already addressed.
And I think that's a really valid point. A lot of when you start to get into modern apps, a lot of people start getting very excited about building their own Kubernetes and, doing all their own stuff. And you get some people very excited about the future of open source and how everything's open source and we can build it all ourselves. And, I don't know about you, but I find myself quite a lot going to customers where they've already tried to do all that and realize that, as you quite rightly point out, it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's not just building your own Kubernetes. It's thinking about the security. It's thinking about the lifecycle management. It's thinking about the operations models. It's thinking about the integration with various things. I remember talking to a customer very recently about how they'd proudly built their own Kubernetes, and then I said, so how are you getting on with the GPU integration with that? Because obviously I know that your teams are asking for GPU integration. It was kind of a blank face came back, and it was, well, that's exactly what we've been working on with Dell, NVIDIA and others to try and make this work and be as seamless as possible for you. So it's really important that people understand that the real power of the partnership that comes from what we're doing together is in that operations piece, right? It's the operations piece is where the difference comes. I'm sure you can go and build your own kind of versions of what we're doing here, but the fact that this comes as a fully supported operation model is very important. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I definitely agree with that. It's the operations is basically getting the customers closer to the thing that they wanted all along, which was, how can I reduce the time to value for my applications? How can I actually start to see the benefits of them? If they have to employ a bunch of people to engineer a solution to make all the operations work, then they're taking resources away from the key thing, which is making the application do what it needs to do. And that's where I think you see a big change in the way organizations fund their IT. More and more the funding is coming from the departments that need these mission critical applications. And so they are less inclined to want to be spending money on engineering things, when in fact there's already a platform where they can build this on, and then at runtime they can make the decision of where's the best place to run those applications that's going to give them business benefit.
Yeah, I suppose that's what I was on to get to next was, it's quite worked out really well, is where are you seeing the shift of power within the companies that you're talking to, within the enterprise you're talking to, in terms of the buying power of the application, so to speak? Yes, let's rewind a few years, and everything we were doing at Dell and VMware, 10, 15 years ago was talking to infrastructure people. Obviously, that's not the case today. So where's that balance of power shifted in your eyes?
Well, I think there are two parts to it. The first part is that the people who have the need more and more are spending their money that previously would have gone on marketing initiatives or partnership initiatives or different types of R&D to becoming fully digital. I think it's inevitable that nearly every organization is going to become a digital organization. I mean, you say, hey, you used to be a chain of restaurants, and now you're a digital organization that happens to serve food. You used to be a manufacturing organization, now you're a digital organization which manufactures widgets. That change in mindset is rippling through all of the business leaders in terms of engineering or sales or research and development, even into legal, HR, other supporting organizations. And because those people have their own budgets to spend, they can take decisions which in some areas you might think, well, is that competing with the IT department that has a bunch of people looking at the engineering? I don't think it is competing, because really you can bring these whole departments together so that you give people the confidence that the IT is reliable, is secure, is scalable, but you also give the people the confidence that we can use this platform to very, very quickly build the business applications that you need. We always talk about this idea of failing fast and lean innovation, and none of that actually works unless there is a platform to be able to do that. And so that platform has to be something that you're building on which is strong and secure. It's not going to be wobbling and falling over the first time you get too many people who really like your service and brings the thing down, for example. So there's that. The second point is just coming back to security. We've seen a huge number of cyber incidents in the last couple of years, and the people that feel the pain from that are normally the business lines of business units, right? The people who are in sales, or the people who are in fulfillment, the people who are face-to-face with the customers. And so I think that any solution that we come up with has to be mindful that those are the key stakeholders, and everything we do has to make sure it has the capability to include the DevSecOps approach, so that every time you're building something, for sure it's already been tested, it's already had some kind of penetration testing, it's already looked at for vulnerabilities, etc., etc. So I think those are the key drivers.
It's interesting you keep mentioning platforms there. I remember presentations we were doing 10 years ago talking about infrastructure people have to build platforms to provide services. You need to think differently. And I think we've now seen a world where, entirely that. There's other people out there with fantastic platforms providing services. So it's a competition now as to staying to keep up with that, I suppose, really, as from an on-premises perspective. And I think that's really where we come together, is enabling people to build equivalent or better services on premises than they can get in the cloud. And we're going to hear actually from Rui at the end, from TimWeTech, with exactly that, where they actually were able to provide a better service on premises than they could do in the cloud. So, as we wrap up our little chat here at the beginning here, Elliot, what's the things that you see coming in the next 12 to 24 months that excite you? I know as a CTO, I'm always looking at the next tech and wanting to play with the next thing and getting excited about what we're doing. And there's a few things on my list. What's on your list, I suppose, of things you're most excited about getting your teeth into or seeing come to market over the next 12 to 24 months?
Well, it's absolutely around the further adoption of artificial intelligence and machine learning. We already encode that kind of approach in all of our products that we make, and nearly all of our products are effectively software defined and have an API to them. So in the background, for example, if you're allocating some storage somewhere, there's a little AI module which is working out, is that the right place to put the storage? Can I predict if it's going to be accessed next, etc., etc. So that's from a technology point of view. But imagine when that becomes so that nearly every organization in the world has some capability of AI, probably at the edge, probably running as a small model in a container somewhere, and you're thinking, all of these predictions, how are they going to come together? How is the customer going to manage that? What are they going to use that in different ways to accelerate their business? It's absolutely fascinating, some of the new advances around, for example, the whole codex approach. I don't know if you've seen that particular one. Mm-hmm. Then you start getting into this idea of AI is programming, or not programming, but inputting to other AIs. So you've now got an AI with a customer is now talking to an AI with a supplier. What's that going to do, and how are you going to respond to that? These kind of things can only happen if the applications that you're creating are fully software defined and fully automated, there can't be a process happening where somewhere a human has to deploy another VM or has to create another component. The whole thing has to be automated. So I'm really looking forward to the innovation we've got coming up. There's some announcements coming up you'll see very soon with VMware and Dell technologies around Edge, around 5G, and some more multi-cloud capabilities. So that combined with AI, I think it's an amazing time to be alive.
That's brilliant. For me, I think one of the things that excites me is we're sort of this shift from event-driven to data-driven. I'm excited now looking at where we'll have the data flows in one infrastructure or one application changing based on the change of data flow in another. So it's that much bigger sort of AI ML driven flows of stuff, much more how humans work than how computers work. It excites me
exactly.
But Elliot, look, thanks. It's been fantastic chatting with you this morning. It always is good to chat with you. It's nice to do it in front of a few hundred people as well. It's always a bit more interesting. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Joe. Great to see you. Thanks again. Have a good day.
Brilliant. Cheers, Elliot. Thank you. So now it's time to bring our next guest onto the stage. Joining us all the way from Santa Clara, California, I'm so pleased to introduce you RJ Patel. He's the Senior Vice President and GM for our modern application platform business here at VMware. RJ, we'd love to hear more from you. Please enlighten us a little bit with your views on new ways to engage our customers digitally and your customers with cloud technologies and to scale with demand over any channel. Over to you, AJ.
The transformation in industry forming. So let's get started. I have 3 topics I want to touch today. Thanks, Joe, and delighted to be here with partners, our favorite partners here, Dell, in presenting to you what we see the future of modern apps and how we see the transformation in industry forming. So let's get started. I have 3 topics I want to touch today. Speak to you in terms about what I and others are seeing in the area of digital transformation. What are some of the foundations of modern applications that are driving this transformation? And then introduce you to our Tanzu portfolio and how we, as VMware and Dell, are partnering to deliver solutions for this transformation. When I speak to CEOs across multiple industries, one theme is constant. There's a sense of urgency in the boardroom to drive transformation. In the banking industry, we're asking the question, how do I become a modern digital bank? How do I transform my processes? How do I deliver incredible customer experiences while still meeting the regulation and the compliance needs of the business? In the telco space, you're looking to see how you want to monetize your massive 5G investments to increase your ARPU and stay ahead of the competition. But more importantly, you're also struggling with the scale and the innovation in technology and how to make your developers productive. In retail, how do you provide an omni-channel experience? How do you blend the physical and digital world into a seamless reality for all of your customers in order to compete with the online retailers that are starting to get more and more momentum in the market? And COVID has only accelerated this trend. So across the board, where we're finding that applications are the heart of the digital transformation. Every enterprise is becoming a software company in some form or the other. If you look at the statistics on the left, software development has become a core competency of this digital transformation. A statistics that really rings home for me is the number of new applications that will be built in the next 4 years will exceed what we've been doing for the last 40 years. And all of these applications are being built, or most of these applications are being built in containers, using containers and Kubernetes. And Kubernetes in particular is starting to hit the prime time, with 65% responding that they'll be running Kubernetes in production. But no enterprise is a greenfield. You're dealing with your legacy, you're in a brownfield environment. You have to start by looking at your application that exists today and see which of these you're going to modernize and how you deliver digital experience on top of these existing applications. These applications have been traditionally built in Java, .NET technologies, and you're looking to modernize these. And we're finding that Spring Boot, and Spring Cloud are becoming the go-to technologies for these modernizations. So now let's look at the foundations of these modern applications. As I said, containers are the foundation for these modern applications. It is the way customers are looking and developers are looking to package and deliver this capability at speed on top of any infrastructure. These containers are being orchestrated by technology called Kubernetes, and 65%, as I said, are running Kubernetes in production. And the benefits are clear. They're doing it to deliver improved resource utilization, leverage the power of the cloud to drive faster application upgrades, and more importantly, increase the speed by which they can get applications in production, particularly leveraging services and cloud technologies at scale. But as they're doing it, they're finding that the complexity is not going down. It's actually going up. They're using more than 2 clouds on an average. Multi-cloud is becoming the norm. And as customers are starting to look at their future, they're recognizing they have to prepare for this multi-cloud future. 92% of the enterprise have a multi-cloud strategy, and 36% of these enterprise spend more than 12 million per year on public clouds. So the spend is going up, the complexity is going up, and enterprises are looking for a way to get their hands around this complexity while leveraging the power of the cloud. So how do you do that? One of the key things you have to do here is really bring together and apply modern DevOps practices. I always say modern apps require modern DevOps practices. And this requires you to have a platform that really unlocks and enables multiple stakeholders to come together. So the application teams, the infrastructure teams are not at odds with each other, but they're working hand in hand with each other. Security is built right into the platform, right at the get-go of how you start developing application, not after the fact, once the application production. So these 3 key stakeholders of apps, security, infrastructure, and DevOps have to collaborate more closely together. And it's a changing culture in which developers own the quality of service. Security teams are partners in the delivery of this service. And infrastructure and DevOps practices make it possible to spin up infrastructure on demand, leveraging these core technologies of Kubernetes and containers. Looking to simplify operations, being able to have visibility built right into the application platform. This is what's required in order to deliver these great outcomes. At VMware, as we work with customers, we recognize you can think of the problem in 2 distinct areas. What does it mean to set up an operating environment that leverages containers and Kubernetes at its core to virtualize your cloud infrastructure, to lay down that platform on which you can deliver great applications? We call this the Kubernetes Operations Platform, or in specific, the VMware offering is called the Tanzu Kubernetes Operations Platform. Tanzu Kubernetes Operations focuses on 4 key distinct areas. How do you set up a multi-cloud container as a service and Kubernetes as a service capability? How do you deliver a self-service capability to your developers so they can spin up a Kubernetes environment on the infrastructure of your choice? How do you start to then provide platform lifecycle management so that you can continuously update, patch, and keep this infrastructure consistently up to date so your developers don't have to worry about it, whether it's a dev environment, whether it's a testing environment, or it's a production environment. You now have a simple single entry point by which you can deliver a great Kubernetes dial tone. On this Kubernetes dial tone, it's important that at scale, you have complete visibility of what's going on in this platform, particularly when you're running on public cloud or third-party infrastructure. You no longer have the way to look into or have access to this infrastructure. Nor at this scale, you have the ability to kind of recreate an environment. So platform observability becomes critical. Being able to have built-in observability so you know exactly what's going on in your infrastructure, it's critical to operate your business. Data security is also critical. As you're starting to build these microservices or these fine-grained applications that are a collection of services, it's not just important to protect the north-south traffic, traditionally done through load balancers and firewalls. You now have to think about your east-west traffic, as well as the service-to-service communication above and beyond the infrastructure. So you may get some of your security at the infrastructure from the cloud provider, whether it's VMware, Dell, or public cloud. But you now need to worry about some of the application and service level security concerns. And technologies like service mesh become critical. Technology like MTLS for securing traffic between 2 endpoints becomes critical. These become critical pieces that make up a Kubernetes operations environment. So what we've done here is taken upstream compliant Kubernetes with all this technology that is relevant for Kubernetes, package and harden that, bring that together to deliver to you an operations platform that has built-in platform observability, that has the application security, the infrastructure security that you need, that is enabled for service to service communication and management. allowing you to do it in a policy-driven way using technologies like OPA, etc. On the other hand, you want to make sure there's a well-defined interaction between, as I said, between your platform team and your development team. We've tried to take this complexity of infrastructure and make it easy for developers to create a great self-service experience, giving them that public cloud type self-service experience that's consistent across all the clouds, whether it's VMware Dell clouds or public clouds. That consistent developer experience consists of providing developers an easy way to get started, allowing them to look at all the APIs that they need, whether they're internal or external, making sure those APIs are secure and protected, making sure they can create secure container builds that they can deliver continuously and consistently into production. Starting to look at leveraging next generation technologies like serverless and functions so that they don't have to worry about any of that infrastructure and they can scale to zero depending on the types of application needs from the infrastructure. And doing so that you can start using and building these enterprise pipelines that are part of these DevSecOps solutions. So how do you start to bridge for a developer to get started, build out these secure containers, get them in production in a consistent, continuous, reliable way, and giving the platform team the hooks so that they can see what's going on and instrument security every step of the pipeline, not after the fact, just at runtime, starting very much with code, but ensuring that it's also secure in production. Having the security operations team being able to define those policies that can be instrumented into these pipelines. That's what we're trying to achieve. And we're doing this through now Tanzo application platform that's in beta, now going in GA in Q1, to start to bring a great DevX experience for Kubernetes, hiding all that complexity of having to package together multiple cloud native technologies and DevOps toolchain elements to get your application production. So really focused on how do we make the life of DevX developers easier and solve the DevX Kubernetes experience issue on the application platform side, as well as the operational concerns that you have in terms of running and operating Kubernetes at scale. That is a complete solution that VMware Tanzu looks to offer. A great platform for developers, a phenomenal platform for operations to give you that consistent development and consistent operation experience on the cloud of your choice. We won't have time to go completely into the details of both of them, but let me touch on a few of the key highlights that make this platform really incredibly easy to use and very compelling for you to solve some of these key challenges we've talked about. Let's start with Tanzu Mission Control. At the heart of the Kubernetes operations platform is a cloud control plane. It hides the complexity of the underlying infrastructure, effectively virtualizes your cloud infrastructure, giving you a consistent Kubernetes dial tone. It allows you to manage the full life cycle of an upstream compliant Kubernetes clusters, no matter where you're standing them up. You can stand up a Kubernetes cluster on vSphere, on public clouds, or through use of Kubernetes from a native public cloud, like an EKS or AKS. So Tanzu Mission Control allows you to deploy a Kubernetes compliant solution on top of the IaaS of your choice, or managed and overlay on top of a Kubernetes service, like an AKS, EKS, leveraging that Kubernetes dial tone I talked about. Once you've got the dial tone set up, it's important that you start to think about the platform observability. So it comes built in with observability and diagnostic. It comes with the security we talked about in terms of the guardrails that you need at the networking layer, as well as at the service layer, so that you can start to protect the connectivity of services and how they speak to each other. And it's all built on a common policy model. And the great thing about a policy-based approach to cluster management is enforce its security consistently across your entire fleet. So Tanzu Mission Control gives you that capability to manage fleets of Kubernetes clusters at scale without your cost or your operational overhead going out of whack. Right? It gives you a way to manage this in a consistent, reliable manner. And it particularly is leveraged by many of our larger leading organizations that are setting up platforms team. This is a single pane of glass, the first pane of glass that customers go to manage their Kubernetes infrastructure and start to effectively deliver additional capabilities on top of it. Once you've got the platform in place, we're now able to deliver additional value like cost or a catalog with Tanzu application catalog, or Cloud Health can give you a visibility of cost across the various endpoints. Tanzu Service Mesh delivers that connectivity and traffic management I spoke about earlier. So think about Tanzu Mission Control as your multi-cloud control plane for delivering and operating Kubernetes at scale with built-in operations, observability with built-in policy for fleet management, as well as all the data management and cluster lifecycle management that you're looking for. Now, once you've got this Kubernetes infrastructure in place, you can start thinking about Tanzu Application Platform, which I spoke about earlier, for developers to be able to leverage this infrastructure or this Kubernetes Delta on which to lay down the application. Tanzu Application Platform is the industry's first modular platform as a service. It's an application platform that takes Kubernetes native capability and brings them to life for developers. It gives you all the power of a cloud native platform without its complexity. These developers start with what we call application accelerators. It's inspired from the work we've been doing with Spring and Spring Boot for many years. It gives you all the scaffolding and the safe paths to production your architects and your platform teams have set up. If you're looking to build a Spring app or Java app with using Spring Boot and Spring Cloud, you have an accelerator for that. If you're looking to leverage TensorFlow for some of your AI ML work, you have an accelerator for that. It allows you to take these best practices and effectively, one of my architects says it's like an architect as a service. It packages up all your goodness into starting blocks for you to use. Developers can now access these starters from their favorite IDE. They can start collaborating with each other through our API portal. They can start to publish and collaborate on the APIs that you're looking to use. It leverages something called Tanzu Build Service to allow you to build and package up these images into secure builds and secure container images. It gives you rich capability to scan, sign, and store these images into a repository of your choice. It effectively enables a GitOps operating model. And then it gives you the continuous delivery capability to start putting this in production, configuring all the related infrastructure for application delivery, including gateways, load balancers, security endpoints, etc. It also allows you to now leverage runtime, whether it's a Kubernetes runtime or cloud native runtime for certain kinds of application. This complete orchestration or choreography is done with built-in opinions and best practices from VMware, but also allows you, it's modular and flexible so that you can plug in and create and add your favorite tool, your DevOps tool of choice in every step of the way. This idea of opinions makes it easy to optimize and deliver the best practices. These are your opinions as an enterprise. These are not just VMware best practices or VMware Dell best practices. It allows you to customize your pipelines and gives you an effective tool to bring the power of the technologies you already have in-house, but also the modern technology and the upstream innovations that are happening in the world of CNCF, Kubernetes, and this DevOps ecosystem. It's powerful in the fact that it's a modular path. It is an application-aware platform. So developers don't have to worry about all the platform concerns, but the annotations, the conventions that the company has set up, developers are able to just describe their intent through manifest, very similar to the old Cloud Foundry model. We have a notion of a workload manifest that describes the application and the intent of the developer, and the pipelines and the automation does the rest. We can do this consistently, continuously, and we can do this at scale. So the power of Tanzu Application Platform is it runs on any Kubernetes. You can run Tanzu Application Platform simply on EKS or AKS on a public cloud, or can use it with Tanzu Operations Platform to give you a complete application and infrastructure platform or operations platform. So these two platforms can be used independently or together to give you a complete operating environment. We're really excited about Tanzu Application Platform as it delivers many of the Pivotal Cloud Foundry outcomes of developer productivity, security, scale, but leverages all the power of modern Kubernetes natively. So it's a native platform built ground up to deliver the kind of PaaS outcomes without the constraints or the limitation of a traditional PaaS environment. So it's the best of both worlds. It's modular, it's pluggable, it's extensible. You can dive into Kubernetes YAML if you need to, but we can abstract away when needed. That's the best of both worlds, and that's the Goldilocks zone that everybody's been trying to attack in terms of just enough abstraction when needed, and the ability to dive into the detail when needed. That's the power of Tanzu application platform. Now, I've talked quite a bit about these platforms really working on any Kubernetes or being independent of each other. So then the question you ask is, so, what's the power of having a VMware Dell IaaS or cloud infrastructure that brings everything together? And the best example I have here is the work we've been doing with the Dell and VMware vSphere team in terms of driving some incredible performance and density when you bring these stacks together. So VMware Tanzu on vSphere effectively makes it a great container and an orchestration and a runtime platform for modern applications. vSphere is effectively the workload platform, and we've kind of hidden away or removed this debate about containers and VMs. It's a single platform or single resource management platform, if you will, for running VMs and containers. Because in the world of enterprise, you're not going to be just running containers or VMs. The statistic I saw recently is even in the next 3 years, as much as 50% of the estate is going to be VMs and containers. So in this mixed mode world that you're living in, you need a single platform for running VMs and containers effectively. And what we've done here with the vSphere team is made it the best place to run containers with 6.3x higher pod density and 8% higher performance. That actually was astonishing, because your general view is, hey, if you put a layer of software in between, the performance actually should go down. But the ESX engine and the vSphere team has been optimizing and driving so much value and efficiency out of the infrastructure. It's carrying forward now from VMs to containers. So 8% higher performance, 6.3x higher density. You can start to run this more cost effectively on a VMware Dell stack than anything else. So collectively, you now have a great developer experience with Tanzu application platform, a fleet management or operational experience with Tanzu Kubernetes operation, and the performance, scale, and security of a VMware cloud environment. This VMware cloud environment is available in Dell infrastructure, as well as any of the public clouds. So that consistent development, consistent operation, and phenomenal performance and density and security all bring together the best solution for your multi-cloud modern apps development. And nothing better than that is taking a customer example to speak to that. So the next slide, I'll talk to you about a great example of a customer who's seen this value and is bringing it all together and leveraging the power of VMware infrastructure, VMware platforms, and VMware development capability to deliver great results. To bring it all together, let's take a customer example. This is a great example of a customer that's a VMware Dell Tanzu customer. This is a global transportation, e-commerce, and a business service provider. And if you look at the priorities for the customer, they're consistent with what I said I'm seeing across industries. Speed to market against competition, being able to accelerate the frequency of updates for customer-facing application services. That's what's driving the need for a platform that's efficient, but is also effective and allows them to deliver innovation quickly. They're looking to operate a complete multi-cloud environment and roll off what I call 50% in colo and 50% in cloud. The co-location powered by VMware Dell technology. Customer cloud team is developing applications using the Tanzu platform, delivering Tanzu Kubernetes as the runtime and the deployment and management platform, with over 250,000 devices also being managed by a Workspace ONE product. So this is a great example where the customer is looking to run a multi-cloud hybrid environment across cloud and data center. They're looking to deliver great value. They're looking to do that cost effectively. They're looking to manage this in a way so that they can have a consistent developer experience and a consistent operating environment across both the private cloud environment and the public cloud environment. It brings together the power of vSphere for the performance and density I talked about. It brings together the power of the VMware networking stack. It brings to the power of Tanzu, all on the Dell platform. So this is a great example where the two companies can come together. So I'm so excited about this presentation, as well as how the two companies can come together and deliver outcomes for you across the platforms of your choice. So in closing, let's look at what I started with. I started with saying digital transformation requires modern application. modern applications require modern DevOps practice. For development, it's about deploying code to production. It's achieving the application SLOs, being able to extract business value from these applications at speed, and being able to continuously evolve and deliver application at much faster rate. It starts with security being built in, being able to put in secure and consistent path to deployment, and being able to enforce policies at the application layer, at the networking layer, as well as into the core platform itself. From an operations perspective, it's really automating what it takes to run and operate a Kubernetes-based platform on the infrastructure of your choice, whether it's a public cloud infrastructure or VMware cloud infrastructure. Doesn't really matter. Abstracting that away, being able to deploy your container-based application using Kubernetes as that platform to run and manage these applications at scale. It's being able to optimize for performance, for cost, for security, being able to deploy the right workload on the right infrastructure, providing the self-service access to the right infrastructure building blocks, as well as the application building blocks, where architects can come in and provide the templates and the accelerators to get started quickly. Bringing all that together with a set of services that help you, enable you to get started, to make that cultural change of how you set up a cloud operating model. With the help of Tanzu Labs, we can help you in setting up the platform or help you build these modern applications, help you drive these faster path to production, build out the methodology, the practices of getting applications delivered continuously, consistently from source code to production in a reliable manner. So I hope you have enjoyed getting a view of the Tanzu portfolio. Hope you give us an opportunity to work with you in terms of delivering this great value and get you started on your own transformation, whether it's on the application side or the platform side, or together we can deliver great value to you as VMware and Dell. With that, let me hand this back to Joe for the rest of the program.
Thanks so much. Look, that's really driven home the message that applications are at the heart of digital transformation, and Tanzu Labs really can help you pull all these requirements together and build that platform that's right for your org to modernize your applications. And along the way, they can and will help you adopt this DevSecOps approach to software development and delivery. And that's really important. So now we have another guest already lined up. So let's welcome Itzik to the stage. Itzik's the VP of Engineering Technology at Dell Technologies. And Itzik, thanks for joining us. What are you planning on telling our audience today?
Hi, Joe. Thanks for inviting me over. So I'm going to discuss and actually show some demos around how does our storage platform, in this case, PowerStore, integrates into Tanzu with vVols and all of these crazy good things. And also, how do we modernize data protection in the new world of Kubernetes backup and restores?
Cool. Let's crack on. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So let's start. So really, if we just dive in directly into storage, there are many, many challenges that are involved with storage, and there are many solutions even within our own portfolio that can basically solve these challenges, really depending on what you're trying to achieve. So think about VxRail that was mentioned before, a turnkey solution where the customer wants everything to be in a box, including vSAN and the Dell servers, and VCF that manage everything, including VxRail and the Tanzu lifecycle management, et cetera, et cetera. But there are also other solutions if the customer wants to bring their own storage and just use vSphere with Tanzu. And so in that case, the customer can choose from a plethora of our portfolio products, things like PowerFlex, our software-defined storage, or mid-range storage like PowerStore, which we're going to demo about in a second, or maybe even an iron storage like PowerMax, or if you're using object-based storage, you can also use ECS on our object store storage that was mentioned before, and also Isilon that can basically also provide scale-out NAS for non-transaction workloads. So really, it all depends on what you're coming down to in your selection of what you're trying to achieve with Tanzu and the workloads that you are trying to run that are no different, by the way, from a storage characteristic than a traditional workloads. A database is a database, whether it's Postgres or a Microsoft SQL, right? It still requires transactional workloads for that matter. So yeah, we just mentioned VxRail. That's the easy button solution. Many, many customers are using VxRail with VCF today. VCF run on the top of VxRail Manager that orchestrates the entire lifecycle management of Tanzu and all the components that are running beneath it. And then, of course, when it comes to storage integration in the context of Tanzu, you really, really want to use a storage array that integrates into Tanzu with vVols. You want to basically dictate the storage class, the policies that we'll show in a demo. Then that, of course, is what vVols and storage policy-based management is all about. And then, of course, you also want to rethink the way that you're doing backup and restore. There are many, many ways to do backup and restore for traditional workloads, such as VM. But in the context of Tanzu, which again we'll show a demo about, there are other considerations that you want to consider in terms of backing up your Tanzu environment. So storage, probably the most misconception idea around the way that storage arrays integrate into Tanzu is this one. There are a couple of ways to do it. First of all, if you are using Tanzu, in many cases, you do not want to install the storage vendor like us, CSI plugin. CSI stands for Container Storage Interface. You actually want to use the VMware one known as CNS, Container Native Storage. It's basically a CSI plugin that provided to you by VMware and not by the storage vendor, and it dictates and connects to the storage array via vVols and SPBM policies. So instead of talking about SPBM policies, let's just show you how it all looks like.
For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm using vSphere 7 Update 3. By navigating to the Workload Management tab, you can see the supervisor cluster is up and running. The LMC PowerStore has a default vVol data store configured upon deployment. In this demo, I will show you how PowerStore vVols provide efficient, granular, policy-based automated storage provisioning to VMware Tanzu workloads. The first thing we need to do is to build a storage policy in vSphere that can be referenced by Kubernetes storage class manifest. To create a storage policy, we go to the VM storage policies page in vSphere and click Create VM Storage Policy. Here, we provide a name and click Next. And then we check the box to enable rules for Dell EMC PowerStore vVol storage. These rules are automatically created during the PowerStore VASA registration. PowerStore QoS priority rule determines the relative performance prioritization for the VM or persistent volume if the system experiences resource contention. We click Next to confirm that the vVol data store is compatible with the storage policy, and then Next and Finish. PowerStore vVols leverage storage policy-based management to ensure VMs and persistent volumes have the appropriate storage capabilities through their entire lifecycle. VM storage policies can be optionally created after the storage provider is registered. Next, we navigate to the Tanzu namespace and go to the storage section. We click on the Edit Storage button and add the Dell EMC PowerStore storage policy that I've just created to our namespace. This allows us to create the persistent volumes on my Dell EMC PowerStore vVol data store. vSphere with Tanzu also allows us to set resource limit per storage policy in order to set quota per namespace. Now, I log into the supervisor cluster using the kubectl command with the administrator at vSphere local username. Next, I switch context to my namespace using the kubectl config set use context command. By running the kubectl get sc command, we can see that the PowerStore policy appears as a storage class within the namespace. I use this storage class in my manifest file of my Ttg cluster. This storage class is used for both control plane and worker nodes. You can also see the namespace and the Ttg name. The VM class can be selected from the default VM services classes. Now, let's create the Ttg cluster and go back to the vSphere user interface to see what's actually happening in our namespace. We can see that a new Ttg cluster has been created and the control plane has been built out but hasn't been powered on yet. I'll speed things up a little bit as this process can take up to 10 minutes to complete. Now that the process completed and all the master and worker nodes are up and running, let's log in to the guest Ttg cluster I've just created by specifying the Tanzo Kubernetes cluster name and namespace. We can take a look at the nodes to make sure we're in the right context. Here, we can see the tree control plane and 3 worker nodes. Now, let's connect to ParStore Manager and navigate to the vVol data store. You can see that we have multiple vVols, and each of them belongs to a particular Ttg virtual machine. The type of vVol provision depends on the type of the data that is being stored. Config stores standard VM configuration, such as VMX file, logs, and NVRAM. Data vVols store data such as VMDKs, snapshots, full clones, and fast clones. And swap store a copy of the VM memory pages when the VM is powered on. Now, let's create a stateful application inside my Ttg cluster. For the purpose of this demo, I will deploy an application called Yuga by DB, which consists of 3 master and 3 worker nodes. Each has a persistent volume claim that will represent a single virtual volume on ParStore. We can see that within a few seconds, the persistent volumes are created on ParStore. Each vVol VMDK is basically a single Kubernetes persistent volume that is attached to one of the worker nodes. Persistent storage is presented through the VMware CSI driver, called CNS, Cloud Native Storage. If we navigate to the Containers Volume tab in vSphere, we can see very useful information about each and every PVC, such as its name, labels, data store, volume path, health status, and more. Now that all the pods are up and running, we can access the application UI by navigating to the service address and specifying the application port. One of the most useful features of Kubernetes is the ability to scale up and down stateful applications on demand. This can be done very easily with a single kubectl command. If we go back to vSphere, we can see that for each new pod, a new ParStore vVol has been created and attached to the worker node. The changes are reflected immediately in ParStore Manager and the application UI, as we double the tablet's nodes and the total capacity of the stateful set. Another useful capability of the CSI driver called online volume expansion. This feature allows us to automatically expand the persistent volume size on the backend storage array as well as the file system itself. As soon as we save the file, we see an extend virtual disk task in vSphere client. By navigating to ParStore Manager, we can see that the vVol size has been updated as well. One of the unique features of ParStore is the VMware awareness in ParStore Manager, especially with vVols, where we can see the performance metrics for each and every virtual volume, which is in our case represents Kubernetes persistent volumes. In order to demonstrate these capabilities, I'm going to generate sample data on my database. By navigating to Yuga by DB UI, we can see that the load is distributed across all the pods participating in the cluster. In addition to the main performance dashboard we have in ParStore Manager, we can drill down to each and every virtual volume and get visibility of the latency, IOPS, bandwidth, and IO size for each virtual volume, allowing us to get full visibility and analyze our Tanzu workloads. Another very interesting feature of Tanzu is VM Service. VM Service runs on top of vSphere with Tanzu and allows developers to deploy virtual machines using kubectl declarative object configuration while simultaneously allowing the IT administrator to govern resource consumption and service availability. Now, let's see how we integrate with ParStore vVols and VM Service. We log in to the supervisor cluster and switch context to the main namespace. Here, I created a CentOS YAML file where I specified the image from the content library. We can also set additional parameters such as the storage class, which in our case is the ParStore vVol storage class, the power state of the VM, class name, and more. At this stage, all we need to do is just to create the VM using the kubectl command, exactly like we create the Kubernetes pods for persistent volumes. And within a few seconds, we have a fully functional CentOS virtual machines up and running. These CentOS VM disks are also parsed to virtual volumes, just like the pods from the previous example.
All right, so as you can see, very, very direct integration between the storage array to vSphere, and also what I like to call a dual persona mirror, meaning that if you're a Kubernetes admin, you're very likely to use kubectl to manage your storage array or even vSphere. But if you're a vSphere administrator, which is Tanzo is all about, you can just continue using vCenter and the vCenter UI, and you're using common elements that you're already familiar with, like vVols and SPBM, to maintain, monitor, and establish namespaces, which is really a unique benefit when you're using vSphere with Tanzu. So the next bit is data protection. Obviously, you're running stateful application in Kubernetes because the data is important. In many cases, the compute is actually far less important because you can reprovision the OS. But the data itself, if the data is gone, it's a very, very bad day. And so what we did is we developed, again, a direct and unique integration with our Power Protect backup product that can back up traditional VM environments or physical environment, bare metal environments, etc., but also added the ability to use vVol snapshots and backup containers running in Tanzu. So let's see how that's actually works. I'm going to accelerate the demo a little bit to save some time. So let's see how it's all going to look like directly from within vCenter.
We install the Valera plugin and used by Power Protect for protection purposes and the Valera supervisor namespace. By navigating to the supervisor services tab, we can enable the Valera vSphere operator. This operator provides the ability to backup and restore Kubernetes objects in vSphere with Tanzu. Now that my environment is configured, we can start protecting my vSphere with Tanzu Kubernetes workloads. The first step is registering the vCenter server that hosts the Tanzu Kubernetes guest clusters. We specify the name, the IP address or FQDN, and add the vSphere credentials. Here, we can also enable the daily schedule discovery of new vSphere objects. Now, the vCenter is added as an asset source. Next, we click on the Kubernetes tab to add the Tanzo guest cluster as a new asset source. We check the Tanzo cluster checkbox and select our vCenter that contains the guest cluster from the list. Then, we need to specify the service account token for the Kubernetes cluster. We click Verify to review the certificate and token information, and then we click Save to save the configuration and finish. As we can see, the Tanzu cluster was added successfully. The virtual machines are successfully discovered as well as the Kubernetes namespaces. During the registration process, a Power Protect controller is installed on the cluster, which is also used to install Valero and Data Domain Object Store plugin, as well as the vSphere plugin. From Power Protect Manager, we navigate to the protection policies and then click Add. We specify the policy name and set the policy type to Kubernetes. Here, we select the purpose of the backup, either crash consistent to snapshot persistent volumes, or exclusion to exclude some of the assets from protection. Here, we select the assets we wish to backup and click Next. In the Schedule page, we click on the plus backup to add primary backup. We select the recurrence and fill the details accordingly. Next, we can use an existing storage unit to store the backup or create a new one. We click Next to verify the provided information and click Next again and finish. We can now see the two configuration jobs created for the backup policy. Power Protect performs backups according to the backup schedule. In order to run a manual backup, we click on Protect Now, and here we select some of the assets or all the assets defined in the protection policy. Next, we can select the backup type and the retention period and click Next and Protect to start the backup job. We can monitor the backup process from PowerProtect Manager or directly from the kubectl command running the kubectl get backup job command. To show the backup details, we run the kubectl describe backup job and specify the backup job name. Now that the backup completed successfully, we can restore our assets. We navigate to the recovery page and click on View Copies to see our backups. We select the backup job from data domain and click Restore. Here, we select the cluster to which we would like to restore. Next, we select what objects we would like to restore, the whole namespace and PVCs, or just some PVCs. Next, we select whether we would like to restore it to the original namespace, a new namespace, or an existing different namespace. We click Next and Restore to start the restore job. PowerProtect supports self-service restore of namespaces from within a Kubernetes cluster. So Kubernetes admins can restore their assets directly using the kubectl command and the YAML files they are used to work with. So there's no need to contact the backup admins for this purpose. I really hope you find this demo useful and thank you.
Right, so again, the two-way mirror mentality that I was talking about, we are big believers in not forcing our customers, which is you guys and girls, to learn yet another user interface. So if you're familiar with vCenter, awesome, use the vCenter UI, which PowerProtect integrates into VI plugin. If you're a Cube admin and your portal to the world is kubectl, awesome, we extend the kubectl framework and API, and just use kubectl to back up and restore your containers. So wherever you are on your journey to use containers, use Tanzu. It's super easy to use and very well integrated into other frameworks such as storage, which we shared with you, and data protection. So thank you very much.
Itzik, look, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. I mean, as a techie, I love seeing demos, and we're going to see another one now, and it was great to see those. And I love the fact that the work has been done to integrate both PowerStore and PowerProtect so closely with what we're doing on the layers above, and the fact that you can go down and manage those through kubectl is just mind-blowing. I love that. It's so cool. So thank you, Itzik, for joining us today, and I really appreciate the work that your team put into doing those demos. Thank you.
Thanks.
So as we move on, we do have another demo we're going to jump straight into now. I've got Kevin Brady, who's a senior staff architect here at VMware. Kevin's going to talk a little bit more about how we can now take these Kubernetes cluster management. And you heard earlier us talk about applications being able to be managed across multiple clouds, both on-premises and in the clouds. And you can't do that unless you're managing and running your operations specifically around that container platform and Kubernetes consistently across all of those environments. And so that's what we're really going to get Kevin to do for us today. So with that, Kevin, I'd like to hand over to you. Kevin, welcome to the stage.
Thanks so much, Joe. So hopefully my audio is good and my screen is coming through well.
Yep, we're all good.
Tanzo Mission Control is a software as a service offering from VMware. And as you've seen in previous sessions today, it allows you, it's essentially your easy button into managing your Kubernetes environment. So once you sign up for Tanzu Mission Control, you have this great landing page here. Your Tanzu Mission Control journey starts here with a lot of videos and then links to areas where you can learn more about Mission Control and about our entire Tanzu portfolio. Mission Control is all about giving you the ability to group your resources and then apply consistent policies to them. So it could be consistent security policies or application policies. And the way we do that is by giving you the ability to create these things called cluster groups. And then within those cluster groups, I can then have a whole set of clusters. What I can do then is I can extend my administrative domain to the cluster group level. And for example, you'll see here several of these cluster groups. I can apply policy and drive it down to every member of a cluster group, which saves me tons of time and effort on going cluster to cluster to cluster. Perhaps I want to integrate a security policy, or perhaps I want to push down a patch or a security patch, or I need to administer some users. I can now do it at a much higher level and drive those policies down. So as you can see here under my cluster group E2 America, and this is a demo environment that we use for showing off Tanzu mission control. You'll see if I look in clusters, you can see I can control clusters from various platform providers. I have Azure, I have AWS, I have Google Cloud, and I have my VMware resources. As we mentioned before, the absolute perfect platform for hosting Kubernetes is our vSphere environment on something like a VxRail by Dell. But if you look here, I can see I have gone and I've added various resources. This one happens to be on Azure. It also gives me, not in addition to the view of my cluster and looking at some of the health of the cluster, you'll also notice that I have this thing called integrations here. And what integrations allows me to do is it gives me a super simple way to integrate other Tanzu products, such as in this case, Tanzu Observability. So if I click on this link, what you're going to see is it takes me to Tanzu Observability for this particular workload cluster. And this is going to give me the ability to drill deep down into the application layer of all the applications that are running on this particular cluster. And that was all done simply by going and clicking this add integration button here, which is going to allow me to add all integrations. As we talked about before with data protection, you can see that I've already enabled data protection on this cluster. And in this case, what it's doing, it's cleaning up an old backup. Going back to my clusters again, let's take a look at another cluster. And this one's running on AWS. And you'll see this one has multiple integrations. I not only have observability, but I have this really cool VMware product called Service Mesh. And what Service Mesh is doing is it's giving me a single namespace across all my pods in my application. So as you can see here, what I'm seeing is this application called Acme. And it's really just a demo application to show a modular application that contains a shopping cart and a web front and various other backends. And what Service Mesh is doing is it's providing me a single namespace across all these different applications that are running as pods, and these could be running in different providers. So these could be running in AWS, they could be running, I might want my backend running on vSphere because I may want to take advantage of some great Dell storage running on my backend on my native vSphere. My database can be running native. My front end can be running in AWS. My cart can be running in Azure. I tie them all together with Service Mesh, and through mission control, I can do that integration, and I can look at everything under this single dashboard. So going back to my clusters, once again, you see that I have vSphere, I have a Google Cloud. No integrations have been done here. So I could add either observability or Service Mesh, and adding them is really, well, typically as simple as clicking that button and then adding in the credential that I already have for something like Service Mesh or Wavefront. Now switching to another cluster I have here in Mission Control, you'll see I also have an Openshift cluster right here. Now I've added an Openshift cluster just for this demo. And what you can see is I can now look at this Openshift cluster exactly the same way I looked at my other clusters before. So there's no difference. In fact, any cluster that conforms to the cloud native definition of Kubernetes can be managed by Mission Control. And the way I do that is quite simple. Through Mission Control, I can either create a cluster or I can attach a cluster. So in the case of my Openshift cluster, you can also see right now I have a VxRail cluster that I'm in the process of connecting. It's saying unknown because it's what it's waiting for is the handshake back from the cluster. Attaching a cluster is as simple as going through and clicking the attach cluster button. I give the cluster a name. So in this case, I'll call it demo cluster. I assign it to a group. I can give it a description. So I can talk about what it is. I might want to identify it. In this case, maybe I'll say it's a VxRail cluster because I'm going to attach with VxRail. I can give it a label. So for example, maybe I want to label this as a demo and then give it a December date just so I can then search for it. Gives me the ability to set a proxy configuration. And the reason this is super important is a lot of times customers are running behind a proxy. And I want to be able to set a proxy configuration so I can access it. Tanzo Mission Control is running in the cloud. It's a SaaS service that's running as part of the VMware cloud. So a lot of times businesses may have firewalls in place or running by a proxy server. And I want to be able to set that proxy server in order to properly install the communication. And then you'll see here what it's going to do is it's going to give me the ability to install an agent. What that agent does is it creates some, once I click this link and I send this link down, I execute this link on my Kubernetes cluster, you can see here where I can view the YAML file. It's essentially a YAML file. It's going to create a whole bunch of pods that run as an agent on that cluster. That cluster then will initiate a handshake, which then communicates back to TMC and completes that process. Once that agent's running, and again, you'll notice that on this cluster, you can see that I'm waiting for the handshake on the VxRail. Once that handshake's been completed, I can then go in and I can manage that cluster. So I can do things like I can go in, I can set policies. So I can go in and I can set policies for that cluster. And I have this concept of something called direct access policies and inherited policies. Inherited policies mean that those were policies that were part of the cluster group. So as soon as I add a cluster here, it always gets those clusters, those policies through inheritance. I can then do what's called direct access, which are policies that just apply to this cluster. And then I can add them simply by going in and creating a role binding and saying, I want this role for this identity. I can do a group or a user, and then I just assign it to a user identity. That then pushes that policy down to either a cluster, or I could do it in an entire workspace. I can also, we talked about quotas before. I can also assign quotas from here, so I can make sure that anybody that's running in this cluster is not going to absorb an excessive amount of resources. I can also do inspections. What an inspection allows me to do is verify that this cluster is conformant. So I can run it to ensure it's conformant to the Kubernetes definition. And this is done using an open source product that VMware has placed into the open source called Sonobui, which is what the Cloud Native Foundation uses for determining conformance. I can do a CIS benchmark, or I can do virtually any other inspection that I have available. And then I simply select the cluster that I'm working with. So I know that was a really super quick demo. We have limited time here. What I will add in is that a lot of this technology that's been talked about today by Ajay and Joe and Itzik can be viewed at our hands-on labs portal. So if you go to labs.hol.vmware.com, you can play more with mission control, and you can look at a lot of the other Tanzu technologies that Ajay mentioned in his session previously.
Kevin, thank you very much. I really appreciate that demo. It's been quite a demo day, and it's been fantastic to see all these. And so thank you very much for putting the time to that. And thank you for joining us today, Kevin. I really appreciate it. Cheers. So next up is the bit I've been building up to today, and I'm really, really excited about this, is I get to chat with a customer who's actually done all this. We've talked about the theory, we've kind of demoed some theory, we've shown you some possibilities here, but now I want to bring in and talk to a customer that's actually engaged with this and delivered this. So with that, it's a great pleasure to bring on Rui Fernandez from TimWeTech. Rui, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Hi, Joe. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope you will hear me okay.
Oh, yeah, I can hear you fine. And
Okay,
thank you so much for putting the time in. I really appreciate it. It's nice to see you again. So, Rui, just to get started, can you tell us a very little bit about TimWeTech? Who are TimWeTech? What do they do? And what's your role within TimWeTech?
Well, my role is about a CIO and a CSO in the TimWeTech. I'm responsible for all the infrastructure of IT and security in the IT. TimWeTech is a digital mobile enabler. We work in 80 geographics in all the country and with 20 local offices all over the world. And what we do, we have proprietary solutions that we focus on OTTs and VAS, service for digital or telecom operators in all the world. So we help them to create value and leads the IT teams on the local operators. So we do that for them. Okay, so we present solutions that to partner management, digital engagement, fintech to these operators. That's what we do.
All right. So how does modern apps come into that? And what's your strategy with regards to modern apps? What are you doing in this space? We've talked about modern apps a lot today. Well, how does that mean to you?
Well, modern apps enables us to create unique, superior, and engaging experience to the customers, enjoy services and execute tasks remotely, and conveniently boost loyalty to customers and rewarding good customers to those operators. So our techniques, the gamification techniques, and can shape customer behavior. We have proprietary algorithms to provide to those operators to see if they have, for example, good credits for us to provide advanced credits to these customers. Mm-hmm. And these modern apps, these telecom operators, sometimes they ask us to use a public cloud in their country. So yeah. To be able to do this, we have to go to modern apps. Okay. And there's another thing that is a new trend that is started in APAC, Asia and Pacific. It's super apps now, and expanding also to other regions. Yeah, we are doing this, and this obliges us to work with several different public clouds.
Yeah, so obviously you've been developing these clouds, these apps in the public cloud. What's been your experience of developing in those public clouds to date?
A huge challenge for us internally, because we have a small IT team. So you cannot have an IT team that understands Google Cloud, Amazon Cloud, Huawei Cloud. You cannot have that team. It's impossible to have a team who understands so many clouds. And vastly, we have a huge on-prem data center. We host more than 5,000 VMware machines. So it's a huge workload that we have to our teams. So to operate in 80 geographics or all the world with different public clouds, it's a nightmare.
So how did you come across Tanzu then? You're operating in all these different modern, different clouds. You're talking about the skills gap that we often discuss between, trying to have skills in all these clouds and make it easier. So how did you discover Tanzu? Did a Dell salesperson walk in your room one day and say, you should have this? What happened?
No, I'm very, very careful with this. So we do the shootouts look to Antus, we look to Openshift, we look to several things, okay, but Tanzu provides us a good environment, easy to use a skill set in the house, and it was very easy to set up. And we have a long history with VMware. We have a company with 20 years in the house, but we have enterprise license agreements in VMware more than 10. So we have a very knowledge of VMware solutions and the confidence that can provide us a very nice support when things gone bad.
So you were using Kubernetes in the public cloud. You then started with Tanzu to build your own application platform on premises. Did you then start bringing applications back in from the public cloud once you've done that?
Yes, we actually did that because latency obliges to that in sometimes. And there is some public clouds that is not very friendly. There is not a standard yet to work in the modern apps. So if you cannot have modern apps to develop in your premise and to public in all the clouds. No, it's not. We are not there yet. But for us, the solution is multi-cloud. Obviously, it's no. That's why we need an umbrella that can collect all the information and manage all the clouds, all the modern services that we need to manage.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we just saw in the demo, is that ability to
Yes.
manage on-premise and off-premises as well. And that's really key to you, I know, because I know from chatting to you before, your IT teams have kind of lost control over the developers' environments. And
Yes.
How has this changed for you now? Have they got control back?
No. Well, yes, but we first try to, in quality and in development environments, we use an IT expert that's developed from open source Kubernetes cluster. But when it's so risky that when the guy leaves, we cannot operate that because it's so many variables we can configure and manage, is a nightmare. So now I don't use those kinds of environments. We have deployments in Tanzo in all the environments, quality and development. Because of that, it's a very risky thing, and for a security point of view, it cannot be controlled.
Yeah. So I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is people start to go off and start creating their own Kubernetes clusters and doing their own things, both public and private, and they don't put all the right operational controls in place. So, you know, is that operational control the real true benefit that you see from running Tanzu on Dell technologies, or is the what do you see as the real killer features there?
The real killer features. I can talk about a lot of them, but for me, for my team, it's the skill set that can be managed and the control where Kubernetes is a very difficult thing if you understand, because they are redundancy is all built in, so you cannot see if something goes down where it goes. So the operating systems must reinvent themselves. You can not do this if we are sysadmin. Sysadmin doesn't matter here. It's the legacy. Here, you need the platform to help you, and Tanzu helps us. Where is the problem? When you can do that? To a point of view of managing all the environments that you have. It's impossible if you don't have this kind of tool. The Kubernetes governance is a very difficult thing to do.
No, that's brilliant. Look, Rui, thank you so much for the time you spent with us today, and I really appreciate you telling our story your story to us, and how it's made a difference for you. And thank you for being a customer. And I look forward to working with you much more in the future as we go forward with Dell and VMware. So thank you, Rui, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Bye, Joe.
Bye. Thank you. So to close up now, I mean, it's really great to have someone like Rui come in and talk about how it's made a difference to his business, how the fact that they could then build a solution that was easy for them to configure, simplified their operational security problems and the challenges, and made it much easier for them to adopt Kubernetes both on premises and in the cloud. So, you know, before I go, hopefully the message has landed over the last 90 minutes, but if it hasn't, let me summarize it for you. Simply, there's these three reasons I see why this partnership between Dell Technologies and VMware Tanzu is so powerful. The first is meeting your needs where you have them, right? From build your own with best of breed components to full turnkey pre-built standard configs to a completely managed as a service app, platform, as you heard with Apex. Dell Technologies has the infrastructure to speed up your adoption and transform your applications approach. Also, second point, that ability to modernize at speed. Once you get that environment up and running, you can start to reap the benefits every day with streamlined ongoing operations, as you heard from Rui and Tim Rutek there. From optimizing your operating plan to improving efficiency and security, and not having to have different skill sets trained up for all the different clouds, that ability to take advantage of the best where it is and make sure that you're still in control anywhere you're doing it. Openness and control is key to what we talk about here at VMware. And lastly, that reducing of costs and improving of security. You can achieve that ultimate IT agility, deploying your modern apps anywhere with seamless workload placement, flexibility, and consistent infrastructure across private, public, edge, and cloud locations, right? So with that, it's time for us to part ways today. If you have any questions or concerns about anything you've heard today, please rest assured that we are here to help you and guide you. That's exactly what Dell Technologies and VMware are doing together for you. Don't hesitate to reach out to your local Dell Tech and VM representatives, and fill your questions out also in the post-event survey, which I'd encourage you all to fill out. So thanks again for sticking with me throughout this event. Thanks to all the amazing guests we've had on, some fantastic demos, some great stories, and some really good visions about why this is happening and where we're going with the future. And so with that, thank you, and I wish you a fabulous rest of your day.